Abuse of prescription drugs by young people is on the rise, and the CSRA is not immune to this very real issue.
A lot of young people think prescription drugs are less risky because they're prescribed by a doctor. Preventing domestic violence, it is the goal of a panel comprised of some heavy hitters, the state's attorney general, law enforcement agencies, and advocacy groups.
Hi everyone. 4 years after the stopped, since the war began, 3,192 U.S. troops have been killed, more than 24,000 wounded, at least 50,000 Iraqi civilians have died.
It's war.
Welcome home. Welcome home, everybody. It's your man Stryker, and this is War. We're all recovering. Every episode, we go deep. We talk about the battles that don't make the headlines. We keep it real here. The ones in your mind, your spirit, your family, and your past. Before we get into it, I got to bring in my brother, my day one, y'all know, my co-host, my man who's been with me in the trenches, 2 deployments, 2 continents, 20 plus years of solid brotherhood. From Lansing, Michigan, my co-host, my brother, Summertime. What's going on, Summertime?
Going on out there, family? How y'all feeling?
Feeling good, feeling good.
It feels good to be back at the table with you, brother.
Yes, sir.
You already know we don't sugarcoat nothing over this way. We talk real life, real pain, and real recovery. And today's one of those episodes that hits the soul for real.
Yes, facts. Today's guest, she's got a story that screams war energy. A
Yes,
story about breaking away from narcissistic abuse, rediscovering purpose, and turning that pain into healing for others. She's the founder of Spicy Old Souls. I love that name, by the way. And trust me,
yes.
that name fits. Welcome to We're All Recovering, Chris. Chris Wasko, ladies and gentlemen.
Thanks for having me.
Yay! Chris, let's start from the beginning. That moment you made that choice to cut ties with your narcissistic parents. That takes strength in a lot of people. You know, a lot of people never find that strength. What was that breaking point for you?
I love how you say how difficult it is to do that because it goes against the grain for a child to cut off their parents. And it still is the most difficult decision I've made in my life. I had a very volatile upbringing, and that followed me into my adulthood where my father had hit one of my children, and I still chose to forgive him. I chose to carry on with a relationship with my parents, even though my mother did her usual of gaslighting and trying to make me the problem, even though it was my child that got hit, who was only 2 years old at the time, by the way. And so took another 8 years, and he threatened to hit my husband. And I just finally said, enough, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not allowing any more violence into my life. And I'm not going to be the scapegoat anymore because I just got tired of it. And in the same event, my brother got involved, and my brother has turned into my father, where he was yelling, he was criticizing, and I watched him start hitting his own children, even worse than we were probably treated. And I said, you know what, I've already seen act 1 of this. I'm not sticking around for act 2. I'm done. And I never looked back.
Wow, man. That's something to live through. I'm sorry you had to go through that,
Me
Chris.
too, Chris. Me too.
But some people think family automatically means safety. But sometimes family is where the first wounds start. When you
Yes.
finally, right, when you finally walked away, what emotions came up first? Fear, relief, guilt, shame, what?
Fear. I was terrified. When you're raised by people who constantly punish you and hurt you physically, emotionally, the first thing is fear. What are they going to do to me to try and hurt me?
Right.
And so, yeah, I went right to fear, and I felt anxious for the first time in my life.
This is a really tough subject. It's making me angry.
Anger's good in this because it can propel us forward.
Yes.
It took me some time to get to anger, but it was an appropriate part of my healing journey. I don't carry it anymore, but oh, I allowed myself a time to be pissed. Um, at
Right.
at everyone, myself for allowing it for as long as I did, for my siblings for perpetuating the behavior and the abuse, for my mother who should have been a safety net and in no way protected me or her grandchildren, and especially to my father for not learning to heal his wounds, his of what he dealt with growing up. So anger's really helpful when we're trying to heal. I think we are taught we have to stifle anger. We have to keep that inside. But when you do that, it just evolves into rage. So when you see very angry people, much like my father, it's because they weren't allowed to feel, they weren't allowed to have emotions. Thank you for putting out there that you're angry because I think anger fits. It doesn't mean we live there and we stay there. And it's same with victimhood. You know, I had my moment of being the victim of a woe is me, but that's not who I am anymore. And that's not my story. I'm a
Yes,
survivor. I'm a cycle breaker.
yes, you are. Thank you. Thank you, Chris. And you said something before that stuck with me. Um, that this was about protecting your kids from what you went through. That's generational warfare right there, you know. That's the kind of healing that changes bloodline. Would you say that, that's what opened up the door to your spiritual awakening?
Yes, completely. I used to work in business, so I lived a very muggle lifestyle, as you would. And the fact that my healing journey led to so many gifts. I started seeing people in spirit. I started hearing people's inner thinking. I started being able to read the chakra system, and things just kept coming on board because what was happening is I was healing my nervous system because I was no longer in fight or flight. I had to teach my body safety, and when your nervous system is calm and relaxed, you're more open to all of these gifts. And we're all open to them. It's just a matter of how they come to us and how they work for us. But yeah, for me, it was definitely that nervous system regulation that onboarded all of the stuff I already could do. There were hints of it over the course of this lifetime, but nothing to the degree of what I do now.
Right. Right. It's about finding your peace, your inner peace, right, Chris? Um, that's real. You know, sometimes peace doesn't come from praying for change. It comes from choosing it and letting go and letting God take the wheel. Right?
Yes, yes. Are you breaking up there summertime or you good?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay. Sorry about that. Chris, you mentioned how this journey connected you with something bigger, something spiritual. For someone listening who doesn't really understand that side, what did that awakening actually look like for you?
Well, I think summertime actually really said it, the word peace. I found peace and what it truly meant to have peace, and that you would fight for your peace because it's life changing. It does so much to come to that place of peace because it's calm, it's comforting, and you're no longer in survival mode. And I think that for me was transformative on so many levels. It's made me a better person. It's made me a better wife. It's made me a better mother, a friend. I've healed so much because when you're raised by narcissists, you're going to carry some of those tendencies. Because in order to be a cycle breaker, you have to look at yourself, a really hard look of what have you already been carrying forward that you didn't realize. So doing that, having that element of self-reflection was so important for me. But doing that just again got me at that place of peace where I will do anything to hold on to that peace. Doesn't mean life won't get hard, doesn't mean I don't have roadblocks at times, but I know how to navigate them better and I know how to face them better. And it has just been, like I said, transformational.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Right.
Sounds like it.
And I think you realize like where you came from. You know, you never forget that. So that's amazing. And, because sometimes the world makes us think that healing only comes from talking it out, but real healing, that soul surgery, that's different. When those experiences started happening, did it feel peaceful or did it shake you up a little bit?
I wouldn't say it was peaceful as I was going through it. It definitely shook me up.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was, I think the best expression I heard was it's like mountain climbing. Some days you're going up and you feel like you're, on top of the world. Other days you're sliding down and you can't get a grip. And then other days you're just moving along. And that's very much what I feel the healing journey is like.
And that curiosity led you to create Spicy Old Souls. Tell me about that. What made you come up with that name and that vision?
Well, in my work, especially because I've become a expert on narcissism because of my upbringing, because of my healing and how I've just studied it over the course of many years, what I've recognized is that there is always a link between narcissists and old souls. A lot of people talk about the empath narcissist connection, but every empath is an old soul. Not every old soul is an empath, though. So it's a little deeper than just the empath narcissist. It's really the old soul narcissist. So when it comes to spicy old souls, it's really allowing people to understand themselves, their personality, what they've chosen in this lifetime, and it really scales their spicy level, if you will, because that can vary by day. Sometimes we are spicier than others. Why I was led to the name Spicy Old Souls is because the acronym is SOS, and old souls usually need help. So that SOS is important because we're not very good at asking for help because we are our own fighters, we are our own survivors. So that outside help isn't as available as as it probably is, but as we're going through it, we don't feel it, we don't see it, we feel very isolated, we feel very alone. So it's really to help people heal. And because old souls are so independent and they like to heal themselves, it's to help give them some foundational elements to help them put them on that track for themselves. So I look at
wow,
myself kind of as a guide in this.
I love
right.
that how you came up with that whole thing. That it makes total
SOS,
sense. Like, yeah, I just
help.
visualized everything. It just came all before. That's great.
Right. Yeah, you laid that out real
Yeah.
nice for us. Um, Sometimes you gotta have spice to survive in this world, you know? You gotta put a little pepper in it, you know? Um, Old souls, they don't come bland. You know, they come well seasoned and with real lessons. So,
Well said,
yeah, thanks
Summertime.
for
Well
sharing
said.
that.
Yes. You talk about you talk a lot about old souls, people who feel different, misunderstood, like they never quite fit in. For our audience right now, how can somebody tell if they're an old soul?
I think just by what you just said, not feeling like they fit in, especially in the family they were born into. They tend
Hmm.
to be the black sheep or the outcast, the weirdo, the scapegoat. They stand out in some way, shape, or form. Even in, I would say, healthier families. I did not come from one of those, but healthier families, it's still going to be the child that just doesn't feel like they fit because maybe they're a musician in a family full of athletes, as an example. They're just going to feel a disconnect. So that
Hmm.
disconnect is actually very important for their soul growth journey. They do pick this on purpose. They tend to pick the more challenging soul lessons. That's why by the time they get to their teenage years, that it becomes very tumultuous for an old soul. This is a little triggering, so trigger warning. I do deal with a lot of parents that have had issues with their children wanting to end their life. And so working through that and getting past that is very, it can be very tricky. So, in just kind of more basic things, old souls tend to be more isolated. They really like their peace. They really like their quiet time because they tend to be overwhelmed by too much. So they tend to be more introverted, or really what I like to use is more ambiverted. So they're not necessarily an introverted person, but they are outgoing with people they feel energetically aligned to. So that's when they're like all chatty and can't shut up because they're just clicking. So that's an ambivert, and that is what old souls tend to be. They tend to also be highly intelligent and kind of a specialized aspect of it too, because they have, it's not even so much of being studied, it's being remembered. So, you have these very skilled musicians, artists, athletes even, because their bodies remember that there's some cellular thing going on in the soul memories. So
Yeah.
you just start to see that it's easier to see in a child because a child doesn't carry all the weight we kind of start collecting energetically as adults. So
Right.
you see some child and put out that vibe, you just feel it. How many times we see a child like, oh my gosh, that is such an old soul. It's a feel, a vibration they
Yeah.
give off that they have been doing this a long time.
Right.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
they've been here before.
Yes. I think my both of my kids are like that. I was told I was like that, so I know that feeling. You know, kind of when you see the world too clearly,
Yes.
or you can see through things, and at the same time, that could cause a person to be very quiet and isolated as well. Uh, when did you first realize that being different was actually your strength?
It took me a long time to be okay with that. In some ways, I
Right.
was, but for a long time, I tried pretty hard to fit a mold because I wanted my parents to love me.
Yeah.
I grew up in a very athletic home, and so I had to work very hard at being the best at every sport I played. And I was a very good athlete up until I had a skiing accident that changed everything because I broke my back, I broke my pelvis. Um,
Wow.
it was life shifting me elsewhere, but at the time it
Mhm.
was the end of what I thought to be a eventual athletic career, possibly. Um, so that was hard too because now I didn't have sports to define me anymore, and I definitely felt like my dad stopped loving me after that
Oh wow.
because sports gave him something to brag about in relation to me because that's what narcissistic parents do. I didn't recognize that at the time. I just felt if I was really good at sports, my dad will love me because he did. At least that's what it felt like. Uh, yeah, it took time. I mean, even my going into the business world, it's because it's what my parents did. My parents met on Wall Street in business, and I eventually worked in, I was working in New York in the city. I didn't do Wall Street, but I definitely was doing things I was kind of groomed to do that I felt would allow me to be more accepted into my family system. So I wish I would have embraced more of my individuality sooner, but when you have parents like I do, you just don't know who you are. You're just been told your whole life who you are, who you should be. The worst things that have ever been said to me in my lifetime have been said by my own parents. And for a while, I believed that. I didn't believe I was lovable. I didn't believe I was worth much for a while, but thankfully, life had different plans and I was able to step out. But it took longer than I feel it should have.
That
Yeah.
sucks. That sucks.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
how
okay. It
long did
was
it
my
take
dream
you?
for a reason. And that's why I
Right.
help people now. I
Right.
needed to live that. I needed to walk the path. Because when you walk the path, you turn around and help others.
Right. And I love how you're helping parents too, how you work with parents and helping them understand their kids who feel too deep or too emotional. What's something parents can do to differently to protect those old soul kids instead of shutting them down?
Listen is usually the it sounds so simple, but how few parents will listen to their children um, and really hear what their heart is saying. Because not every child is great at relaying things via their words, but they have other tells, they have other aspects in how they are trying to be heard. So when you start to really look at your child and not just listen to them on a verbal level, but listen to all the other aspects of what they are trying to show you as an individual and allow that individuality, support the individuality, especially if you don't understand it, because that means they're probably going to do something very amazing. So when we put our limitations on our own children, then we're just keeping them from themselves. You know, we often do it under the guise of safety, but it's usually our own fears. Like, oh, you have to be this way, you have to fit a mold, or people won't accept you. But more often than not, they're better off being out of that mold because they're going to break through these standards. They're going to break through these, boxes we're put into because they're not meant to fit.
Right. That's amazing that you help people start reprogramming their mindsets. Because, a lot of people, they don't even realize they just living inside the trauma that they escape. So yeah, that's big.
So now I want to get into something that's I want to touch on the definition of narcissism because, Chris, I must admit, I've been called narcissistic before in a relationship, and I'm far from a narcissist, and I've been, repeatedly been told by this person that I was a narcissist. So can we start there for a minute? Just let people know what a narcissist is to begin with.
Yes, I love where this is going. So I feel we have the textbook definition of narcissism when it comes to the over grandiose narcissist. But what I don't feel is discussed enough is the fact that narcissism is a spectrum. So you can have someone on that over sociopathic level, like my father, or you could be on the covert end of narcissism, which is all more like my mother. Hence why I'm so well versed in this, because they both had these very different tactics. My dad was very textbook, so it was very obvious to see these elements of narcissism as the way it's defined in psychology and in psychiatry. A narcissistic personality disorder, according to many psychiatrists, is very difficult to diagnose because it's never the narcissist that's coming in for help. It's all the people that have been, subjected to those kinds of treatments and behaviors. So when we understand first that it is a spectrum, and then start to see why people have fallen onto this spectrum, because narcissism is always bred from wounds. So we all have narcissistic tendencies. It's welcome to being human. We all have the ability to have narcissistic tendencies because
Yeah, James.
they're stemming from our wounds. But it's a matter of, do we allow ourselves to live from that place, live from those wounds, and then act accordingly? So when we lash out at people because we feel threatened and we've been triggered, that's responding from a wound. Same in parenting. When we don't allow our kids to do something out of fear, that's coming from an old wound. What created that fear in you to begin with? So there's so many layers to it. It is very much like peeling back an onion to get to these energetic layers of the wound. So that is why, when it comes to just narcissism, it's become a little trendy now to just call someone and blanket them a narcissist. Whereas, are they, or do they have a wound that you've been so able to see that you want to maybe help them be aware of the wound? I feel like that is more important to look at. Especially because I have a lot of people that come to me because they've been in a relationship with a narcissist. And when we look at things energetically, like attracts like. And when we hear that, then it's mind blowing because then we think, oh my gosh, am I a narcissist? No, you have a similar wound energy that has likened you energetically and pulled you together. So it doesn't mean that if someone's just treated you like absolute garbage, that you're that type of person too. So it's very much looking at the wounds and less about looking at what it is to just be a narcissist.
Right.
was
because it
very enlightening because I never knew it was a spectrum. So I might fall somewhere on that spectrum. I'm not sure.
We all do. We all, or we all can, I should say. We
Right.
all can. We all have that ability. That's what it is to be human. And we live in such a narcissistic society.
right, and I don't know, but I think if you are a true narcissist, like it it's never about it's realizing it's never about you making a mistake. You pretty much can't admit that. It's always about, you know, what somebody else did to make you react, how you reacted,
Yes.
or you know. So yeah,
Yes.
I think you're good, James. I think you're good, brother.
Thank you,
You
thank you,
know,
thank
A
you.
true narcissist does not have the ability to be self-reflective. So if you've been able
exactly.
to look at yourself and ask yourself, oh my gosh, am I a narcissist? And really get into the layers of why you might
Yeah,
think that, why
right.
someone has called you that, and climb into that, then no, I wouldn't say you would be a narcissist.
I
I would
knew
say
it.
you.
I knew I wasn't.
Hey,
No, I'm not.
thank you for
Thank
putting
you.
that out there, because some people really need to hear that and understand that. You know.
Yeah, no,
And
I mean,
so,
my parents can't hear it.
Right.
Neither of them. Everyone else is the problem. Everyone else is to blame. Things have been done to them.
Yeah.
It's never about that. And, but that's victim mentality. And victim mentality also comes from wounds. So
Yeah.
it all comes down to our ability to heal and look at those wounds and look at what's hurt us so that we don't turn around and hurt other people because we're hurting.
you
Hurt
Right.
people.
you walked me
That's
right into what I wanted to talk about as far as narcissistic abuse, because that's something that leaves scars you can't always see. And what do you think? What do you want people to know about the kind of healing that takes place after you've been manipulated or gaslit for years?
Oh, that is really a more difficult one. I even used to say when I was younger that when some of the things my parents would did in a more verbal manipulative form, I would say I just wish they would hit me than do things like that. Because those kind of wounds really do run deep. Hitting that kind of stuff, that does heal in ways. But the emotional stuff, the emotional trauma, that really weaves itself into your energy body and gets you on a soul level. So those are the things that we really need to unpack. I always like to look at what someone's trauma response is. So when we look at trauma responses, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, we tend to fall into one predominantly and like two as a backup. This doesn't mean you won't at one point in life kind of fall into each of them, but primarily what we do as human beings is we fall into them. It's our adaptation style. It's what allowed us to survive these circumstances and experiences growing up. So that is our go-to method of survival. So when we adhere to that method more than just being able to just live like a normal human being, we are just reigniting those trauma responses in the body. So when we recognize the trauma response, why we do it, that's how you really start to unpack, okay, here is how this affected me on a deep energetic level. Then taking the steps to heal from that so that you don't go so quickly to that response. So like for me, just as an example, I go to fight or flight. So I am going to be in their face, standing up to them, because that's what I had to do. I protected my siblings a lot, and I would get in right in front of my father, and I would be ready to take a hit so my siblings wouldn't have to. And but that's scary. And then in other ways, I would run and hide. I don't want to do this. I don't want to be here. So those were my survival adaptations. So now if I am presented with somebody like in the wild, so to speak, and they do something to upset me, I've had to teach myself that they're not necessarily a threat. I've just been upset, and now I'm just reverting to my trauma response. So I really had to teach my body that it was safe, that it was no longer in this threatened atmosphere. This is often talked about, I know you gentlemen are from the military, but in, dealing with military wounds of PTSD, When you've been raised by narcissism or you've been in narcissistic relationship, you usually have dealt with complex PTSD, where you are having these things built over time again and again and again and again. So it keeps reinforcing these traumas. So when we get to these trauma responses in situations where we're still not in those ignited behaviors, they're being ignited because we feel like we're in that same environment. So the trauma responses and healing those are one of the key elements.
Okay. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. What did you want to say? Sometime you look like you wanted to say something.
Oh no, no, go ahead, brother.
Oh, I was just saying, like, that's tough because a lot
No,
of
I was
people
just
don't.
feeling that. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
just,
yeah. A lot of people don't realize that, the trauma they escaped, and, how do you help with people, start reprogramming that mindset?
Say, well, it's going to vary by trauma response. A fight or flighter, for example, has a more heightened nervous system. A freeze fawner is a little more quiet. A freeze fawner is, especially a fawner, I find to be a little more challenging because you're trying to teach them that they're worthy. So when a fawner is almost always become an adult that's a pleaser and that will always
Hmm.
ignore themselves and always want to please everyone around them just to keep the peace, just to keep them happy. So they never want to, oh, I shouldn't say they never want to, it really depends on the person, but more often than not, they feel bad to look at anyone that has hurt them as the bad guy, so to speak. So I really have to sit with them and say, this is not about passing blame. This is not about being the victim. This is really just about exploring experiences and how your body responded. But it's really hard for them to say, I had one client actually pretty recently, and she doesn't look at her parents in any negative light. And I had to really explain to her, I'm not asking you to, but we really, I keep going back to them turning their back on you. And so she said, yeah, but who cares? I was ignored. That's not anything that anyone should be upset about. Yeah, it hurt. I was like, but that's what we look at. It does hurt to be ignored, and that matters. But a fawner really has a hard time doing that. Really hard, because they'll always compare. They'll look at somebody that, like me, who got hit a lot, who got hurt physically, mentally, emotionally, and think, I had it worse, therefore they have nothing to gripe about. But I always think we should never compare. Our experiences are our experiences for a reason. And to heal ourselves energetically and on a soul level, we have to look at that as objectively as we possibly can, not dismissively.
Okay. Okay. So is fight, flight, freeze, or fawn?
Hmm.
Okay, got it. Got it. I gotta put that in the descriptions. And what you're describing, it's like kind of like, cycle breaker, right? You made a choice not to repeat some patterns. How can someone listening right now take that first step towards breaking their own generational cycle?
Depend by person. For me, I did need to cut off my parents. I don't think everybody
Mm,
needs to do that, but because there was a violence aspect, a true safety aspect, cutting them off was really important. But really, you have to go on your own individual healing journey. And while I think that's reinforced with the next generation, I'm not just breaking the cycle alone, I'm doing it with my husband and with my children, because anything going forward, they're carrying forward as well. So if I start to see elements in them, I'm like, oh my gosh, I taught that. I should not have done that. But, it's really being able to explore that together and, you know, being graceful through this process and giving ourselves that grace, because there is no perfection in parenting. But we do, it's interesting because my mother would often say, well, I always did my best. And I don't agree in saying that, probably because of how often she said it and she favored my brother. So I don't believe that is I believe that's a little bit of a cop out. I believe a true parent is just working all the time to help be the best they can be, but also be the best support they can be to their child. Because I don't believe as parents we're taught enough to be a supporting role. We're often taught to be a domineering, you have to do this, you have to do that. Um, but I don't agree with that, especially with old souls, because they come here very tuned in, very tuned in. They've already have a guidance system within. And when we could just kind of relax and allow them to go through it. And this doesn't mean you're not going to be doing some parenting elements. A lot of people seem to be like, well, you have to parent, you have to get involved. Of course you do. But that doesn't mean you micromanage. That doesn't mean you tell your child that they need to be a doctor or a lawyer when they like art. Elements like that. It's finding those. There's so much self-discovery in a healing journey. And when we heal ourselves, we're discovering so many things about ourselves and then about our children too, because we're not only seeing ourselves in a different light, we see them in a different light too.
Right. You're pulling me like I'm so involved in this right now, Chris. I see myself in so much of what you're talking about. Like it's really hitting me right now. Um, Summertime, I'll give you a chance to speak in a minute. I know you're waiting. Chris, I just wanted to ask you, you also talk about the inner child, right? That that wounded part of us that still shows up as adults. What's one thing someone can do today to start reconnecting and healing that part of themselves?
I actually created a book for this because it was very
Mm,
important for me to heal my inner child. The first time I met with my inner child, because I didn't even know that was a thing, I just decided, oh, well, I'll meditate and I'll connect with my inner child. I cried. I cried so hard. And the reason I cried is because I looked at her at that age. She was about 5. And all I could see was everything she was about to go through. And I just cried so hard, feeling so sorry for her and everything she was about to experience. So, for one, it's so important to connect because it helps validate our journey and it helps us see what still is hurting. Like, because I was carrying that. Why was I suddenly crying when I wasn't that little girl anymore? But it's connecting to that version of us that needs a hug, that needs attention, that needs validation. So the book I wrote is called An Old Soul's Journey. And it looks and reads like a children's book, but it is to allow for us to connect with our inner child and get back to that version of us to say you matter and your journey is important. And as an old soul, it's probably going to be very difficult, but that's okay. You will get through it. Just believe in yourself that you will. Know that you will.
Yeah, that's special, Chris, and can't wait to put the info out there so people can you know get in tune with their inner child, and get it out there because sometimes the toughest people they've been through the worst type of abuse, heartbreak, wars, you name it, just petty behavior, just what have you. But they're the ones. A lot of times, those are the people with the biggest hearts,
Indeed.
and yeah. And when people start healing that, how does life start to change for them? You think?
It's gosh, I don't even feel there's one word. Amazing is probably the first because it is amazing. You just come to this place where you're like, wow, life can be different. I'm not in the same cycle pattern garbage anymore, and I'm meeting kinder people and I'm attracting abundance in so many forms because I just allowed for healing. And it's why I love being on this podcast, that we are all recovering. Everybody has experienced something. And when we
Right.
have compassion for ourselves and for others, it just makes us better human beings and it makes us friends. You know, I have made
Yeah.
so many friends since I've healed. And this wasn't to say I didn't already have friends. I did, and I still have a lot of beautiful friends. And I've also had friends that have, you know, left as needed and part of my spiritual journey. But I recognize how beautiful life can be when we have compassion for the fact that we don't know everybody's story, but know that they've experienced something, they've survived something, and they've lost something. And that when we come from that place of, I recognize you as another human being who's trying to live through this, you know, experience, that we could just be better to each other.
Right.
I'm praying that we get there one day, Chris.
Me
And I
too.
know you also use energy healing in your work. You mentioned it earlier. For someone who doesn't quite know what that is, how would you explain it to them in a way that connects with the everyday person who's just trying to feel whole again?
Oh yeah, this is where things get a little woo-woo, but that's okay. So what I do is I climb into someone's chakra system. So I will literally like connect with somebody either in my office or online, and I ask for their permission to read their 7 main chakras. And I go into each chakra. I start at the root and I work my way up to the crown. And I go into each one and allow them to reveal what they want to reveal. Some people get a little nervous about that because they think, oh my gosh, what is she going to see? But if our energy doesn't want to share, it won't. And if I feel kind of like a wall, I'm not going to try and push past that. I always respect energetic boundaries. But what I'm doing is I'm finding the wounds. I'm finding where the body is requesting healing, and there's usually connections. Like for example, I know when someone has a very disrupted sacral chakra, that they probably have had issues with fertility, or you know, digestive issues. Same with the solar plexus. That's very stomach, ulcers, that kind of stuff. So there's usually something connected to the health. If there's something going on in the throat chakra, you know, I could feel like, I'm like, okay, if you don't already have a thyroid condition, and then they're like, I'm already on thyroid medication. I'm like, okay, well, your throat chakra is basically sharing its struggles. So, you know, some of it they'll already know. I'm just kind of showing what their energy is revealing. But then I like to give them exercises. You know, I'll call it homework, but they can choose whether or not to do it. Some people are very structured in, you know, what I give them, and other people will be like, yeah, I tried it. So it really, again, no judgment. It's where everyone is on their journey. But I really like to give them the exercises to help them heal their bodies and to help them, ultimately, they're healing their energy. Because when the energy is wounded, the body eventually catches up. So heal the energy, heal the body. And the mind is in that as well. Let us not put the mind aside, but
Yes,
mind, body,
yes, ma'am.
spirit, it's all encompassed.
Yes, ma'am. So, Chris, everything you shared today connects to what WAR stands for. Honestly, we're all recovering. You know, no matter the battle, the healing starts when we face it head on and stop pretending we're fine. For anyone listening who's still stuck in that place, what's one message you leave with them?
I'll say it does get better. It does. I've hit incredible lows in this lifetime, and I allowed myself to meet the next day and allowed it to get better. And then in other times it didn't right away, but eventually it does, if you believe that it will. And faith is so important on this journey, you know, and not even just like a religious aspect. It doesn't have to be religious. It's faith in yourself. You know, you just make that decision. I will get through this. I will heal.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that message right there, Chris. And for all the old souls listening, don't hide your light. You're not crazy, you know. You're just early. Uh, you're what healing looks like before the world catches up.
And that's a fact, Summertime. Chris, we appreciate you pulling up, for your honesty, for bringing that raw truth to the table. Everybody watching, go follow Chris Wasko. Check out Spicy Old Souls. And if you're on your healing journey, know that you're not alone. Chris, where can the people find you?
Easiest way to find me is my website, which is my name, chriswasko.com.
There you have it, people. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This is wonderful.
Yes, ma'am. Ladies and gentlemen, Chris Wasko, Summertime. Thank you, brother, for being here with me. This is War. We're all recovering. Until next week, stay sturdy.
Sturdy.
The invasion of Iraq is a good time to stop. Since the war began, 3,192 U.S. troops have been killed, more than 24,000 wounded. At least 50,000 Iraqi civilians have died.
It's war.